Not for long, 2 days.
2 days? 3 days? Well, it's like him. I got confused just by the number 2.
This is going to be a really long.
Do you know it's like midsummer and it's getting dark?
Well, she's even had enough.
Yeah.
Christ, the filming director's decided to disappear.
This is the worst. Shh. Coming up, the media pitch that never was. Hello and welcome to ID Comms Media Snack, episode 84. So we will get to talking about what is possibly the most bizarre media pitch that we've ever come across.
That's right, but first we're going to reflect on 2 days in Cannes last week.
Indeed, all coming up on Media Snack in just the time it takes to eat a sandwich from a well-known English supermarket. So first off, we were in Cannes last week in the south of France.
We were.
Which is the big advertising festival. Called the Cannes Lions, but also called, I think, Festival of Creativity. It's been going a long time, but it's turned into a bit of a circus, hasn't it? With
right.
Everybody stuck logos on everything, and most of the kind of big agencies, vendors, technology companies invest millions and millions of dollars creating these fancy spaces and renting big yachts and things like that. But we had the good fortune to kind of go and speak to about half a dozen kind of clients, big advertisers down there, which was really good. So
for all of its glitz and kind of rosé drinking, it's actually a good place where a lot of clients descend, right? They're being brought by their agencies, by tech providers, and it's a good opportunity, we found, to meet a lot of clients outside of the kind of office environment and have some kind of really interesting conversations. So for 2.5 days, it was actually really quite productive.
It was, yeah. But they're conversations that we could have had somewhere else, but it's just quite nice to do them on the south of France.
But they're all there, right?
Yeah.
So kind of all these international clients all descend on one kind of strip of the south of France.
Yeah, so that's quite good. So, and what do you think, what were the big themes? I mean, we saw some themes coming out of a lot of the conversations and questions that we were kind of being asked last week.
Yeah, and that's what I think was so interesting from our perspective. It was very rare that we were having conversations about pitches or about kind of agency structures. Most of the conversations that we were having were reflective of a client's internal requirements operationally. Yeah. So how should they look to design their own internal structures and ways of working to get the most out of media? And I thought that was really insightful because it was, I think, a reflection of the influence that the ANA report had. So the ANA report 12 months ago talked about marketeers taking back control.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's happening. You can just see it, because those are the questions that are happening now from CMOs, marketing directors and media directors responsible for implementing all of this stuff, realizing that it's not a question of changing the scope of the agency immediately, or not changing agencies, not running pitches. They're all focused internally on the operating model, ways of working, all that kind of stuff around media. Having got a strategy, now they want to understand how to make this all work in a new world of media where maybe you're working in complex number of different agencies.
Yeah, but therein lies, I think, the biggest challenge of all, right? Because these really smart marketeers are going, okay, I need to organize myself better to get the most out of media. I get that, and I need to take greater control before I can begin to start thinking about how I design my agency roster. But where do I start, right? Where do I begin to kind of unravel where I am now so that I can design for the future?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the most frequent question is, so how should we be operating and where do we start? So you need a perspective. If you've been following the last 7 weeks, thank you, first off, you smart person. But in the last 7 weeks, we have looked at kind of to mark the 1 year anniversary of the ANA's report, which we're going to stop talking about at some point, but it's it's omnipresent in everything because it seems to be the source of so much of the questions that come up at the moment. We've actually dug into 7 different areas related to media where we think there's been significant change and will continue to be change in media. But they also happen to be the 7 areas that, as a business, we kind of use as a framework in our advisory to marketers, okay? And just as a quick recap, so that's transparency, talent, technology, thinking, training, terms of business, and trading, media buying. So these are the 7 areas. And we think those are the 7 areas which, as a CMO or marketing director, chief media officer or senior media executive, that's the way that you could kind of simplify the media landscape. Yeah. And when we talk about, right, how good are we right now? What is our kind of as-is state? What's our baseline? Those are a good 7 areas to really do an assessment in, to really understand where we are so that you can track progress over time.
And whatever framework you decide to use to establish where you are, that's where you start. You have to understand the strengths and perhaps weaknesses of your current operating structure and the way that you manage media, and then begin to identify where the easy wins are, where the greatest opportunities are for improvement. You can only do that by kind of doing a forensic analysis of your current as-is position. So that's the recommendation we give. Whatever the structure, whatever the framework, understand where you currently stand, identify the key areas for improvement, and then develop a roadmap to deliver against that.
So one of the things that was also really pleasing to hear and see in Cannes was the attention from senior marketers on media issues. Media's been a big part of the conversation in Cannes for many years, but there's a lot more attention, isn't there, to kind of media issues, I think, now than ever before.
Yeah, and the focus is about getting the house in order first. Yeah. And once they've got that, then they can go to market and identify the right marketing services solution or the right agency solution for them. But getting that structure properly designed internally is vital. And once they then go to market, then they go to market with an ambition for media, with a clear mandate for driving growth through media. And that enables the agencies to kind of prepare themselves for success, if you like. So having that clear ambition enables them to be a priority within the kind of the pitch ecosystem.
And we talked, I think, on some episodes last year, or the kind of the turn of the year, we spent a lot of time talking about exactly that, which was creating a blueprint for media. Don't go shopping for a media agency anymore. Define exactly how you want to work, and then that in itself then determines the kinds of external resources that you're going to need. Increasingly, that's a very blurred lines, right? Some people are bringing some disciplines in-house and want to work with external agencies in different ways. So that allows you then to set the scope of external agencies or help that you need, and only then do you then go to pitch.
That's right.
In theory.
In theory.
But then there are some examples, David, of some advertisers who do seem to launch pitches driven by perhaps an opportunity to save money solely without necessarily a strategic ambition. And get themselves in a little bit of a muddle.
Well, and you're referring to Sainsbury's.
I am, yes.
Okay, so Sainsbury's, it has been announced today, have reversed their decision and will no longer be working with M6, the agency that won the recent pitch, but will actually be going back to PhD, their old incumbent that had the relationship for about 20 years. So, I mean, this is just the most astonishing story of a failed pitch that I could ever possibly imagine.
Yeah, it's a weird one. And for if you hadn't heard us talk about this before, Sainsbury's is a large supermarket retail grocer in the UK, one of the largest, massive business. Have been with PhD, their media agency, as you said, for a generation. And it's one of those relationships between agency and client that everybody thought was kind of beyond question, because culturally so aligned. PhD, reflected in the glow of a great culture at Sainsbury's and vice versa, and they'd grown together and all these kind of things. And it was very close. AMV, the creative agency, had done Sainsbury's creative for years and years and years, and so it was very, very close. Good, trusting relationship. And then last year, Sainsbury's announced that they were not only did they not announce the pitch, they just basically went always back to front and just announced the winner. I think having not really run much of a process. So the suspicion, also, the expectation there was that was a big commercial offer from a WPP agency.
That's right. But the backdrop to this, and perhaps to provide some theory behind that as a process, is that Sainsbury's had recently purchased Homebase Group.
Home Retail Group.
Home Retail Group.
Yeah.
And so, cumulatively they had then a spend of over £150 million. And as we know, with a lot of kind of mergers, there is an immediate desire to realise some synergy savings.
Yeah.
So perhaps the reason for conducting such a swift review was to realise some of those value improvements or hard savings to kind of mitigate against some of the cost of the
which we see a lot. I mean, and you can see, when big mergers happen, it's quite predictable that there's going to be often a very quick media pitch, because it's got to find cost efficiencies of the merge or the acquisition, and they've got to kind of deliver some value to shareholders. And it's a shame when they rush to market like that. That's always a shame. We often get consulted in those moments. When we can feel that there's a rush to market, we often decline, because we know it's going to become a race to the bottom on cost. And going back, the client hasn't, or the advertiser hasn't got their own internal house in order. Yeah. And the last few years, we've just seen a whole number of these where the internal operating model, the structure, the actual requirements of a media agency have not been defined at all. Yeah. But yet they've gone out and put 100 million, 200 million, $1 billion worth of media billings out for pitch purely on price. That's right. And this looks like it was one of those. But this time's backfired because the losing agency, given a testament to the strength of their relationship with Sainsbury's management, actually launched a formal appeal process to the board of Sainsbury's, having lost the business. And after some months consideration, which must have been incredibly awkward, as they stood around pretending to be friends.
Yeah. 4 months.
4 months. Yeah. Still working together, so the Sainsbury's didn't move the account. Yeah. Having appointed Group M, having Group M announced the win, having WPP announced the win in their Q1 earnings report. Yeah.
You're making it worse by just going through the facts. I know.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a difficult situation. Then the business never moved. Yeah. PhD continued to work on it, having known that they thought that they'd lost it because it was subject to review. And now it's kind of been awarded back to PhD, having never left. And the tragedy of that is that what was a beautiful relationship, and that's something that many people around the industry kind of looked to as being really indicative of a deep, invested, trusting relationship between client and agency, has been possibly irreparably damaged because how invested a PhD going to feel in a client who took the business away from them on a whim? So
but I hope, because of that legacy relationship, because of the depth of trust once upon a time between the two, that it will allow them to perhaps move on quite quickly from this. But I mean, who knows? But I think at the very least, it's an example of what can go wrong when you kind of rush to market with a process that perhaps is ill-considered and flawed.
Exactly. So you've heard us say 100 times, prepare. If you're going to pitch media, prepare, get some advice, do it properly, and involve your stakeholders throughout the business. Okay, on that happy note, that's all for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.
Have a good weekend.